Okay, I started it recording because I was afraid we'd get to yapping and I'd forget to press record. Okay, so I'll try to be professional. The purpose of this collab review is Dee and I saw the Arnold documentary on Netflix this past Friday. It was very good. And so we're doing a little collab review discussion about it. So I'll just go ahead and hand it over to you, Dee. What are your thoughts?
Well, let me just say this off the bat. I love documentaries. I enjoy obviously like history in general, and I just think it's something interesting about personal history with the person and
Mhm.
just kind of seeing like not. I mean, it's like you get an insight into the person, but it's also like you kind of see history through their eyes at the same time.
Right.
So when you see certain and even in this film they reference certain things, but just kind of seeing same thing like with my grandmother, like asking her about just certain things throughout history that she was actually there for and present
Right.
for, and it's so interesting from that perspective. And then with documentaries, there is a lot that you can learn with people, public figures, or historical events, or all kinds of stuff. And so with Arnold Schwarzenegger, I've had a really positive experience with him, and a great experience as far as like his films, and of course the time in which I was introduced to him, which was like in the mid '90s, kind of those early years.
Uh,
So so naturally, there's already a certain connection and affinity I have for him as an actor, as a person, just in a lot of different ways. So, and I'll have to say, Netflix actually has a lot of good. I know Netflix has their issues, but I will say they have a lot of good selection as far as documentaries, as far as the different people that they like.
mhm.
I've seen a lot of really good ones, and there are plenty to choose from. So yeah, so going into that, I was excited, especially just learning things that I wasn't aware of. Like I figured
Yeah.
I knew a good amount. I obviously was there for some things. I recall certain things, but then as we watched, I became more aware of just how much I didn't know, especially as far as his athlete, the part one athlete aspect of
Yep.
it, and
Mhm.
his earlier films outside of Conan the Barbarian.
Uh-huh.
And all of
Some were a
that.
surprise to you, like Stay Hungry was a
Yeah.
surprise to you. Pumping Iron, you'd never heard of.
No,
Oh, wow.
that was all new to me. So I just think the insight into him as a person, his like like even things I thought I knew, there was more to it. I always love getting that insight. I love hearing someone's just journey, especially into journeying to becoming the person that I knew, or thought
Right.
for most of what I knew from my
Right.
experience. Because of my age and me being so young, so just off the bat, I would say, just as far as the experience of it, it was really enjoyable. And I think also I wouldn't say with most documentaries, it kind of depends on the one, but I feel like most of them, because we're regaling certain stories and because we're revisiting our history, they just have this poignant feeling to them. Just someone
Mhm.
kind of looking over their life and
Yeah.
just revisiting certain things, remembering people who aren't here anymore. And that's a big part of what goes into some of my reviews sometimes, and the things that I talk about. 'Cause it's like it's not just these experiences with these films, but it's like who was here the first time I saw this film, and whose lap
Yeah.
was I sitting on when I
Yeah. Yeah.
so it's just like all these things come back. So just from that perspective, I love just how even through hearing his memories and seeing his story, it was almost like a reminder to me of what it was like to grow up watching him, and and kind of see certain aspects of his life and then learn about what came before that.
Right. Yeah. I felt like it was constructed really well. I don't think there was much that I didn't know
Right.
already, but it was enjoyable to watch it with someone who's not as I mean, you like Arnold, but, like, I'm like I've just delved more deeply into Arnold as an entertainer and a person and everything. Just I know quite a bit more about him just because I'm drawn to him. I've been drawn to him for years, ever since I was a teenager, and he sculpted my life in some crazy way. The inspiration that he was to me has had a lifelong effect on me, and so I've just always been drawn. So, like, anything Arnold almost anything Arnold, and I'm there, like, I wasn't crazy about Junior.
Right.
I'm not crazy about Hercules. That was a bad movie.
Right.
But, it was Arnold, so I would just gobble it up. But I really liked the way they went through the phases of his life, and I had remarked before, I don't remember if I said it to you or if I mentioned it to Derek, but a year plus ago, maybe 2 years ago now, I can't remember, it's been a bit, but Derek and I had a live stream where we talked about Arnold and the different phases of his life, and I made this little thumbnail, and it showed bodybuilder Arnold, movie star Arnold, and politician Arnold, and that was my thumbnail, and then doggone it if Netflix didn't go and do something very similar with
Right.
their cover art. And so Derek and I were talking, and we were like, "Yeah, you need to, like, take Netflix to court."
Right.
They stole your idea. I doubt it, but anyway, I mean, it makes sense that that's the way they would construct the poster because there are these 3 very definite and distinctive phases of his life. He's now beyond the politician stuff. He's back in the movie stuff, but that's not really defining him anymore because he's already been there, done that. And I just really liked how it was constructed. I liked the narrative that they would insert where he was talking, and then he was having like current Arnold was talking, and then young Arnold, it would show him, he would show him basically reacting to things he had said
Mhm.
when he was younger. And then the sort of the little like the dramatic recreations that they would
Right.
show of when he was a kid and everything. And it was very touching to me. There were a couple moments that hit me really, really hard. It was the one where his mother
Yeah.
passed away and what he felt. I mean, obviously, you have that grief because your mother's gone, but what it meant to him beyond just the normal grief. I can't remember his exact words, but he was saying something like, so like all my life I've been like trying to get your approval and now you're gone and so what is there anymore? That
Yeah.
sort
What
of
am I
thing.
what am I doing this for, basically?
Oh, that was so sad to me because
Yeah.
it was such a contrast to this strong, very self-assured Arnold that we think we know, and inside is still this little kid that's unsure of himself in a lot of ways.
Mhm.
And
Right.
that was very touching. And then at the end,
Mhm.
when it was showing him looking through those pictures and he was saying something about how he hoped he would be remembered. Oh my gosh, bless it. That was rough
Mhm. Yeah.
because I had mentioned right around the time that was showing that stuff, and you had thought it too. It was like, "Boy, I'm really gonna miss him when he's gone."
Mhm.
So, it's very sad because I think something else that makes it really hard hitting is that so I grew up with Arnold as you did in different ways. When you're seeing these things from when he was younger, it's also reminding you, like you said, of your time back then, what experiences you were going through, and it just creates this very strong nostalgia, but it's, like, really sad at the s like,
Yeah.
nostalgia in that like, warm fuzzies, but at the same time, very sad, like, for me anyway, very sad because that area of your life, that part of your life, it's gone,
Mhm.
and you can't get it back,
Yeah.
and it's just, oh, it's very
Yeah.
sobering.
Yeah. I was gonna say it's very similar. We've talked about this a couple of times, but I remember I told you the whole that experience where someone basically where I happened upon that book about the dead malls.
Yes.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, and how it just kind of hit at exactly the wrong time. I mean, and granted, like I'm thankful for just kind of, I think I needed to kind of release anyway. So, I mean, in the end, that's fine. But I just think at that point, it almost seemed like, a little too symbolic of, what life could be. I'm like, will it just be? Because I mean, we all have, in some way, have experienced the mall, thriving and in the food courts and the neon
Mhm.
lights and like all that's a big part. And so to see something like that, and I think even just beyond malls, to see anything that was full of life, a certain restaurant or a certain place in your hometown, like to see anything that had life and was thriving, suddenly not just kind of be this empty shell, and
Yep.
all you have is your memory to kind of rebuild from and recall. That in itself is very it can be very sad, and just, it kind of gives you this sense of longing. Even if you could just step back into that moment as it was, you sometimes wish you could do that, and it's kind of like it's difficult because you can't, but you see
Yep.
it so vividly,
Yep.
and so it's kind of the same thing because like he's still here with us. It's not like he's gone, but it's like you so quickly. It's kind of like thumbing through a book, like he was at the end. It's like you
Exactly.
saw all these things, and I even remember very specifically for me. I don't think we talked about this actual thing, but I remember like with Jingle All the Way, which is such a fun experience, of course. But I think about how, not to say it wasn't significant at the time, but it's one of those films that has gained a greater significance. And of course, it's a fun. It's not trying to take itself super seriously, but it's one of those things where Arnold, in many ways, what kind of reminded me of my dad in the sense that he was this larger than life
Oh,
figure.
yeah.
He was big and built and had all these muscles. I specifically remember, and this is not something I've talked about. We went to SeaWorld. I want to say it might have been 96 or 97. And I don't know what show this was. Basically, the guy on stage like had all these dads come up on stage, and because then they purposely picked ones that looked like ripped and all that, and
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
like 6 or 7 of them, and they picked my dad, and
Aw.
I was like so excited. He went up on stage, and I'm not being biased. I promise I'm not. But the different dads took their shirts off and stuff. And so when he took his off, it was kind of
You're
like everyone was like, "Oh!" And the guy who was on the host was on the stage. He was kind of like, he was being really silly, but this was like, "Whoa, this guy is." And I felt like it was a perfect moment because that's what he represented to me in so many ways. And then of course, it was kind of like, and it's weird because I find that there are so many actors or just certain films where it's just like they remind me of specific people in my life, something about their persona or something about them. And as we kind of watching this with you, I was reminded that, Arnold Schwarzenegger was kind of like that in a sense. And I drew certain parallels, and even just the charisma and the positivity and and a lot of that stuff was very similar. So when he ended up passing away much sooner than I thought he would, as far as my life, then things like Jingle All the Way then took on a greater significance because it's like not
Right.
only is this, I mean, yes, it's a fun Christmas movie. Yes, it's about Turbo Men and all these things, which I definitely related to as far as Christmas and all that. But it's about even him and Sinbad. Like it's about a dad really recognizing that he wants to be present for his son and do anything that he can for him and like really be there. So even with all the hijinks, underneath that is just this beautiful message about fatherhood and understanding the impact of that. And really like, I will, I will go through all this foolishness and all this silliness if it means putting a smile on my son's face and knowing that I love him and I'm here for, so it's just
Yeah.
like all those things it hits differently. So even though, and I understand Jingle All the Way, we only have so many films to focus on. But even when they showed that brief moment of, I think him, I don't know if he was in the Turbo Man suit or whatever, but even that brief moment was like, takes me right back,
Oh, I
you know.
bet.
So it's very. So I understand what you mean. It's just like so many things. You forget how in tune you are with certain people or how connected you are to certain people and certain films until you really think about it. And it's like, wait, there's all this stuff,
All
that
these
comes along.
memories connected with it.
Yeah.
So he sounds like a wonderful man.
Mm.
So yeah, I can certainly understand how that would be pretty impactful for you to like have all those memories tied up in this particular movie and what Arnold represents to you. Was there anything like beyond the stuff that, well, I guess sort of tied into the stuff that you didn't know about that was news to you? Was there anything that surprised you in a negative or positive way about the stuff that was shown?
I mean, it makes sense, but I didn't realize that his upbringing was so
Rough. Uh-oh. There you are. Can you hear me?
yes.
That
Oh,
was you just like froze and then you went away and I thought it was my internet, but my internet's still here.
right.
So it wasn't me.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with mine. It's just all of a sudden it just, and I
Maybe StreamYard
I
just
couldn't even
being
move
stupid.
like my arrow or anything. I was like, okay,
Okay.
weird.
Okay. So, go ahead.
Yes. Like I said, you in a way, it doesn't surprise you because unfortunately for a lot of folks, that sometimes is the experience with some parents. But I guess just in my mind, what I assumed based off of his, because the thing is, sometimes when people have those kind of upbringings, it's reflected in their personas or their demeanor or
Yes.
something. And because he is so
Yes.
far away from that.
Mhm.
You know, sometimes just in my mind, you know, I would have thought like, oh, he probably would have had a more just kind of peaceful, chill experience like with his family, and that was not the case.
No.
And like I said, you know, it's something about I don't know what it is about, you know, when it comes to parents who are a part of the military lifestyle or the police or just different things where everything is so regimented and how they carry that into like their style of parenting and how a lot of times, and I don't think it's obviously it's not the same for everyone, but it just seems like a lot of times there's just this detachment that's there, maybe because they have to have that in the job, but it just carries over into parenting sometimes, and that's not
Yeah.
usually a great thing for the
No.
child. Yeah, so I think the fact that he had that experience was very kind of eye opening. And then in my mind, of course, I can't I don't always know what celebrities or what public figures have siblings. So in my mind, I figured he probably had a sibling. But as we kind of went along, in my mind, I was kind of like, I feel like I just had this weird feeling like once they mentioned his brother, I'm like, I have a feeling like he like when yeah. I just kind of like I kind of
You just
predicted
felt like
what
he
he
was
was
gone. Yeah.
yeah, I was just like, he probably didn't last, you know, that long as far as his life and him living and them being together. And so and then even when he said it was I think I kind of figured when he said he had kind of when he moved, how he just didn't have a lot of communication with his brother and
Right.
they would talk a lot. And I was like, oh, and then you know that's what it was. So and those are things that happen, but I just those are not things that I would have thought would have been at the beginning of his journey because of his, you know, of how he is.
Yeah. Yeah, so I like I said, I knew pretty much everything already that
Mhm.
was mentioned. So anytime something was getting ready to happen, or he said, like, I got a phone call, and I was like, oh, okay, well, this is when his brother died, or this is when
Mhm.
his father died, or whenever. The story about his mother, I didn't know how she had passed away until I listened to the audiobook of his autobiography called Total Recall,
Right.
and he talked about how she had passed away at his father's grave. He did specifically talk about the heart valve issue that she had that was the same that he had, and I for some reason in my brain, I thought I that it was always something that he had inherited from his father,
Mhm.
because his
Right.
father also, I think his father had a he said he had a stroke, right? Or
Mhm.
something. For some reason, I always thought his father was the one with the heart issue, and maybe he did have some sort of heart issue, but I didn't realize it was something that his mother had passed on to him. He didn't get into as much detail about his heart issue and the operation that he had as he did in the book. So, like, he talked about when he felt the first issue of something. I think he said it was when he was working on True Lies.
Mhm. Right.
I think it was the scene when he was swimming in the water, and the fire's going on above him, and he
Yeah.
felt this weird thing in his heart. This is strange, it just he noticed it, and he went to the doctor. They said he had this issue, he was gonna need surgery, and then when he was working on Batman and Robin, I think it was around that time, it's like, "You definitely need to get this taken care of."
Mhm.
And so, like I had mentioned to you, which he doesn't really touch on it as much in this in the documentary as he did in the book, but he honestly thought that he could go to the doctor, go have this heart operation, and then just be home and nobody would know. He didn't
Right.
tell his family in the beginning. He was just gonna go do this thing.
Right.
And it was part of his compartmentalization, like how I mentioned, he would compartmentalize different parts of his life, which is also why I think he was able to kind of separate his bad behavior, like when he had the affair. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if he was unfaithful to her multiple times. It just honestly would not. But
Mhm.
this one, this was a mistake that stuck around. And he's got this constant reminder, but he was able to, like, in some weird way, segment off these parts of his life and keep them completely separate from each other, in
Right.
order, I think it's like a protective thing, to like, in order to protect his own emotions or his own psyche or whatever. And I think that was probably carried through from his childhood, like something that his probably he got from his father's influence as well.
Yeah. Definitely.
Anyway, I loved it. I thought it was really, really good. Anybody who's a fan of Arnold, I think, will really enjoy this. I saw someone on Facebook the other day. So, like, when Arnold went into politics,
Mhm.
he made people on the right and the left very angry with him. Because the thing about Arnold is he he plays this little bullshitting game like he was talking about. He gave it a
Mhm.
name, some name.
Yeah, the German name.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
German whatever that thing
yeah,
is, but it's basically means bullshitting, right?
yeah.
And that's what he did in Pumping Iron. So whenever you do watch Pumping Iron and you see these like this friction sort of thing between him and Lou Ferrigno, this
Mhm.
sort of competitiveness that they and the stuff he would say, a lot of that was it was just amped up for the purposes of making this dramatic sort of story. And it
Mhm.
was all just bullcrap. And so he gets into politics and he kind of plays that game a little bit too, like it was showing those different politicians basically cursing him out
Right.
or something. They were saying something to him, and because there's cameras in the hallway, but like in real life, a lot of politicians they play this game like they're at each other's throat, but with many, and probably some of them do absolutely legitimately just honestly really hate each other. But a
Yeah,
lot of times you hear stories of yeah, they just went down to the pub and they're hanging out like they're besties, you know. And
yeah.
so a lot of the whole thing about politics is this posturing and these stories that they concoct to make it seem like they're on a certain group side or a certain group side. And it's just like, I feel like it's just playing with people, you know, and
Mhm.
it's so annoying. And so he did do a bit of that as you saw, but also something that I think really aggravated a lot of people about him was that he was also very eager and willing to try to reach across the aisle, as they say, because his whole goal, I feel like, was he really was trying to accomplish something. He was
Mhm.
trying to get stuff done. And a lot of times when politicians are at each other's throats, well, some people may have the feeling that that's good because then they're not getting stuff done because the more stuff politicians do,
Mhm. Right.
the more bad consequences it usually has for the population.
Yeah.
But, you know, as far as like working together, trying to accomplish these certain things, and people on the left didn't like him because he's a Republican. People on the right, they got mad at him because he would adopt certain things that are generally considered as, you know, like left wing type of platforms or whatever. So I
Mhm.
had seen on Facebook, someone was like, well, I was with him up until the environmental part, and you know he got influenced by the Kennedys and all. It's, you know, yeah,
Right.
he probably did. He married into the Kennedys. What do you expect? But I feel like that it was kind of funny, and part of me was thinking maybe you're doing something right if you have both sides pissed off at you.
Right.
He was just a totally different animal, you know, just going in there and what he did. And I don't know, I guess history will tell whether or not he would be considered a successful politician. I have no idea. I didn't live in California, and never have, never will. But
Yeah.
I was personally excited for him just because it was Arnold.
Right. Exactly.
And I was happy that you know, he conquered that hill as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I was going to say one thing I really appreciated about the story, and it's granted it's his story. You know, people have a different experience, and that's just
yeah,
the
exactly.
reality. But I
Yeah.
love the fact that we see a lot of stories where people immigrate to the U.S. or they come to America and they're trying to have opportunities and things like that, and it's just this massive struggle, and then it's kind of like this massive journey of kind of dead ends and this and this and that, or even if we think about the because I've been reading and listening to a lot of books about the film industry, especially back in the day, and so a lot how difficult it was to just kind of become a part of it and the things they had to be subjected to and deal with. And I like the fact that. I mean, granted, yes, there were some challenges in the beginning, with him learning English and trying to establish himself and, having to change his body a certain way and adjusting and, like just kind of changing his outlook on a lot of certain things. But I like that because I didn't know about the real estate thing,
Yes.
and
That's
I
something a lot
love
of people don't know, D.
yeah, yeah, I didn't know that at all, and I love the fact that in general, I love the fact that he was just so driven in general because that is just something to really admire. And because if you just looking at where he started and just even at that point, and so I love that even before he really became Arnold Schwarzenegger in
Uh-huh.
this huge public way, he was already set up the way he needed to
Mhm.
be just based off of that, and that's just so different. We don't usually see that, and so even when it came to Hollywood and all that, some people are reliant on the Hollywood system because they are. I mean, granted, anyone. I'm sure there are plenty of people who want to some people want to be stars, and some people actually want to act because they have a love and a passion for it.
Right.
But depending on how that goes, you can become just reliant on it, or you can end up in projects that don't speak to you, or like there are so many different directions to go. But I love that when we got to that point, it wasn't about him becoming an actor or doing things because I don't know, he had to pay his bills or
Yeah,
he was
exactly.
struggling or because it was all this other stuff. It was no, like this is what I want to do next. And but I'm not reliant on this,
Yeah,
like I
right.
already have. This isn't about money. This isn't about just taking whatever. This is just the next phase of my life. And I just think that was, and then even when he stopped at one point, moved on to politics and all that, it just felt like a natural progression. And that's just not something I always see as far as someone's personal journey. Sometimes it'll be like, oh, well, I was stuck, so I did this. And then I was stuck here, so I did that. And then I wasn't sure what to do, so I did this. But it was like,
Mhm.
well, trajectory, direction, building, progression. And I just think that in itself is something that made it so like refreshing to watch. And it was definitely inspiring because I'm like, ooh, I need to
Right.
I need to have some of that in my
Right,
life.
I know. I mean, I've mentioned before how unique he is and how driven he is. And it's like he said, he was comparing himself to his brother. He was just made of something different.
Hmm.
And the way he and his brother both got similar to, well, his brother was a favorite of his father, but his brother was still mistreated. They both were.
Right.
But his brother, he could not deal with that. That was not the type of person he was. And Arnold, as cruel and awful as his childhood was, it created the Arnold Schwarzenegger that we know. If it weren't for that,
Yep.
I don't think he would have accomplished what he accomplished.
Hmm.
This is not, by the way, this is not me advocating for mistreatment of children,
Oh no.
because I have said time and time again that is like the root cause of almost every single bad thing. Like I mentioned in my review for Sound of Freedom,
Hmm.
almost every single terrible, and by terrible, I mean like someone who's committed mass
Right.
horrors, serial killers, terrible dictators, almost every single one of these people have had awful, awful abuse in
Yeah.
their childhood. And so, that's it. It's certainly, Arnold was able to take the, I mean, he didn't suffer some of the worst abuse I've heard, but he
No.
still, it was an abusive childhood.
Yeah.
And this is what gave him this drive, and he kind of like laughs, or he'll like maybe sort of belittle or sort of make, in his Arnold way, calling people girly men. I think that just comes from the fact that he that's not what he is, and he kind of makes fun in a lighthearted way of people that don't have that same metal that he
Right.
has.
Mhm.
And I really admire the drive that this man had.
Mhm.
Some of the what he went through in his life reminds me a bit of my husband. My husband came here not knowing a lick of English,
Mhm.
and he learned English, and he's become his own boss, and he's doing pretty well.
Yeah.
And obviously on a much smaller scale compared to someone like Arnold, but that's the type of drive that it takes. Not many people. Yeah, he had this support system, like he said, I'm not a self made man. I think he's not giving himself quite enough credit. Yes,
Mhm.
he had this support system, but that support system would mean nothing if
Mhm.
he himself didn't have the drive to do
Mhm.
what he did. And there's just not a lot of people. I don't think that comprises the majority of people.
Mhm.
And it's unfortunate because I don't know. I think the world would be a much better place if everybody had that very clear vision in their life.
Mhm.
They would just be able to, like you said, that trajectory. They would know where they wanted to go. They would not let things get in their way, and they would just accomplish their goals. You know how much happier people would be
Yeah.
in life if they could accomplish a lot of their goals. But at the same time, like we were talking, he has reached all these summits.
Mhm.
What
Yes.
else is he gonna do from here? What's his next goal? I don't think he has one. He just right now what he seems to be focusing a lot on is helping people in fitness because he has like this newsletter and the pump club, and he's very giving of
Yes.
himself and his time to different sort of projects that he believes in.
Yeah.
And I guess that's just gonna be his main focus in life.
Mhm.
'Cause I don't what there's nothing else he can do. There's
Right.
nothing else he can there's no other hill he can climb. He can't become president, so that's out.
Right.
Maybe he could go back to Austria and become president over there.
Right.
Yes, you know what I mean? Like, he has no desire. he has always felt like he belongs here in America. And that's
Mhm.
something I always also appreciate about someone like him is so I think a lot of times Americans we take our country for granted. I
Yeah.
think a lot and we are so easy to see the faults in our country that we don't really realize that in a lot of ways this is a great place. Yeah,
Mhm.
we have issues, I know that, but there are so many people that have been able to come over from a
Mhm.
completely different culture, completely different background, and they have been able to thrive.
Yeah.
And so when I look at people like that, and then I look at other people around who aren't thriving, maybe they just want to live and complain and this everything's against them and they just can't do this and they can't do that. And I'm like, look, you have no real excuse.
Mhm.
You are in this country, you grew up here, you speak the language, you are in the midst of all of this. There's no real good reason for most people why you can't do these great things with your life.
Mhm.
So it makes me appreciate things about this country a bit more. I'll still criticize us, but
Yeah. Yeah. Mhm.
but you know what I mean. It just I think a lot of times people they don't appreciate a good thing when they have it, and other people maybe that don't have that same what they consider to be a positive or I'm blanking on the word, but they what they consider to be a great attribute and they don't have it, and then they come over here and they're able to seize it by the horns and
Mhm.
appreciate everything about the experience here. That makes me appreciate some things more.
Yeah. I agree.
Anyway, I can't think of anything else to say now. I mean, I could talk and talk for hours about Arnold and his movies and his life and everything, but we're trying we're we'll try to keep it in check.
Yeah.
I'll try to keep
No,
myself in check.
no, the last thing I was going to say, this isn't really a con because I think when it comes to any documentary or even if we're talking about an actual biopic, there are always things you want to know more about or
Mm,
things that you may know that you wish they would have included. So some of the things and it was actually this is why it was also cool to watch it with you because there were certain things you were aware of that they may not have completely fleshed out or delved
right.
into. So,
Yes.
there's always opportunities for that. It doesn't make it bad because they didn't include it. It's just additional context and additional stories, just things that, I kind of want to know all the things, but we
Right.
also kind of keep the runtime a certain way.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's probably the only thing I would say is something that stood out. And I wanted to say I also it touched me. I mean, it's the reality, it's the experience and all that, but I didn't think that I wasn't sure how far they would delve into it. But, the whole affair situation and how he
Yes.
spoke about it. And even when he, was gonna stop, he was just kind of like, okay, there's only so much I really want to say about it. Because the thing is with documentaries also or biopics even, like sometimes depending on the person or what the dynamics are, they're trying to hide certain things. Or, there are things they
Right.
don't want to, bring to the
Right.
forefront.
Mhm.
But I really felt in him saying like, okay, there's only so much I really want to discuss about this. It was more or less about like, oh no, I don't want to, dig this up. It was more so about like, I understand what this did to, my
His
wife, my kids,
family, his
to
children.
Joseph, to his mother. And so
Right.
out of respect for that, I will just be mindful of what I have to say here. And I appreciated that. And I also liked the fact, because I didn't think they were going to do that either, the fact that they actually showed him, in the
Joseph.
with him, I was just like, oh man. And
Yeah.
the way he, just said like, but he's still a part of my family, and
He's
I love him.
loved. Yeah.
And yeah, and I was just
Exactly.
like, yeah, and
Right.
the thing is, that's how it should be. So I'm not saying it's like,
Exactly.
but it was I appreciated just seeing them in the gym because we started off with that being such a the way it was so
Right,
full circle.
right.
So I thought that
Just
was
came back around almost full circle. Yeah,
yeah,
I had just said to you something about how that he has always loved Joseph and he has been very open in showing his he has not shunned him. He's,
hmm
like cuz some people be like I just don't want to be reminded of this mistake. Let's pretend
right,
it never happened. Arnold has always owned up to it. That's one of the things I really appreciate about him as well. Despite this awful thing that he did, he owned up to it. He made this child feel loved and welcomed. And I had mentioned that his children with Maria have never really fully accepted him. And they kind of, there's stories about how they just completely, and it's not the child's fault. I say child, but this kid he
no, I
was
got
born
you,
in like 96, 97. So he's a
right,
full grown adult, but
yeah,
he's still like a little kid in my brain. But yeah, and he looks a lot like Arnold. He's taken on a lot of the things that Arnold was passionate about, like the bodybuilding. His other kids aren't into bodybuilding, but this child is. And I thought that was just kind of funny. But yeah, I agree. I would have liked to have heard more about other things of his about his life that I knew more about based on the book, largely that autobiography, which is really, really good, as I had mentioned it to you. But there was the tank story. I
Yeah.
was going to bring that up. I'll try to paraphrase, but it's really probably best if at some point you can also go and watch his original telling of this tale. But it
Hmm.
was so he was the tank driver in when he was in the army in
Hmm.
Austria, and they're in the tank, and he's talking to some other people in the other tank, as I guess they could talk by route, whatever. And they're like at the top of this hill or something, and they get this really brilliant idea that they're going to have a race down
Hmm.
the hill. Have you heard this story?
No, I have not.
Okay. So and so you know how when you have a tank and a lot of times you'll have the people that are part of your tank unit sitting outside on the tank. Like they show that in Fury. If you've seen Fury. Have you seen Fury? Did we talk about that?
No, but we talked about it on the
Okay.
stream. I said that's on my
Okay.
list
You
now.
gotta
Yeah.
watch that. That's such a
Yeah.
good movie. Anyway, so people will sit outside on the tank. And so he's inside and he's talking with these other tank. I don't remember if there was one other tank there or if there were multiple tanks, but they all get this really brilliant idea that they're going to have a race down this hill.
Mhm.
And they take off. Whoom, and he's just going along and he's just so, he's into it and he's beating them. But he was hearing these noises. He was hearing these strange noises and yells, and he gets to the bottom, ha ha ha, and he had won, ha ha, but he forgot about the people sitting on top of the tank. And they got thrown off.
Oh, no.
It was like some late night talk show, maybe Conan or Jay Leno that he told the story on. It was so I never forgot. It was like, oh my gosh, this guy. But they did. He didn't tell that story. I was hoping he would.
Yeah, that would have been a good one. Yeah.
But yeah, I could have watched many more episodes of this. There's so much about Arnold's life that's interesting, but you can't put it all in this 3-part documentary. So
Right.
I feel like they did the best they could. Certainly they could have delved into other things, but I guess they just picked out the most important stuff. I do like how they didn't gloss over some of his bigger mistakes in life, and they definitely there wasn't something that they tried to hide. Now, people who don't like Arnold, they could have been like, yes, but you left out this and you left out this and you left out that and that. But I feel like they touched on most of the stuff that he's accomplished, good and bad.
Mhm.
And I felt like it was very well rounded, and I loved it.
Yeah,
Absolutely
I was
loved
gonna
it.
say the same thing. It didn't feel like sanitized or whitewashed or anything
Mm-mm,
like that. It felt very
no.
clear. And I feel like anything that wasn't included was just like I said for the sake of time because
Right.
they just had
Right. And
they kind of stuck to their 3-act structure as far as that.
exactly. Yeah. And him owning up to his weaknesses and, and his strengths. And he's
Mhm.
very open and he's very willing to admit when he is wrong. That's something that a lot of people, that's a problem with a lot of people. It's hard to admit to your mistakes, but he has, I think he's just such a fascinating person. And I had the goofiest grin on my face, I think the entire time I was watching it. I was like,
Mhm. Yeah.
oh. But anyway, this was fun. I'm glad we were able to do this. I'm glad my internet stuck
Yes.
around.
Yes.
Yes, so good. And thank you for joining me, Dee. Was there anything else that you wanted to add before I hit end
No.
recording?
No, I just will say, just like I mentioned when we stopped the first time, like it's very to me, it's very significant. I think it's kind of clear at this point that you don't mind having me on your channel or just
No.
having me on to watch certain things. So that's kind of hard for the course. But even with that, even though I'm kind of used to it, it still is very special to be able to watch something centered around someone who means so much to you and to me, maybe not in the same way, but to also just kind of, well, let me say this when I say not in the same way because we had a different experience because as far as my
Right,
age, but it also adds to the appreciation I already had for him. And then it
right.
also, of course, just helps me bring into greater context your own appreciation of Arnold Schwarzenegger. I didn't, it was very clear anyway, but it's just being
Right.
able to add on, just to that context and all that. It was great. So I just appreciate, and like I said, if you had decided just to watch it and then we had just talked about it and individually, that would have been fine. But having just the shared experience
Oh, no, it was
was
fun.
something that was really great. So
Yeah, I
I'm
held off. I held off. I was really looking forward to it, and like I said, I went to New Jersey, and my brothers and I, We watched Fubar, and they had mentioned the Arnold documentary, like I
Right.
said. I was like, "No, I'm watching that with D Movie Man."
Yeah.
So I didn't watch it. But it was fun. Obviously, yes, I would have enjoyed it watching it by myself too, but it's more fun to watch it with someone who's kind of into him a bit as well, though
Mhm.
not as much as me, but you know what I mean?
Yeah,
You
yeah,
appreciate him, you like him, and it was
absolutely.
fun. I liked seeing things, or seeing you learn about things that you didn't know.
Yes.
And I'm like, "Oh, yep, 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 I knew that, and that was really cool. That's so cool that you didn't know that, and now you do."
Yes, and that's the other part of the documentary experience. Just learning in general is just something for me I appreciate. And then once it's there, it just kind of just sticks with you. So,
Yeah, exactly. Now, maybe you'll go back and be curious to check out some of his earlier work, especially Pumping Iron. I do highly recommend
oh
that.
yeah.
It is true, like they said, that really put bodybuilding in the mainstream.
Hmm.
It truly did, and made him popular, but really it was Conan thrust him out there. Like he got those, Hercules, but Stay Hungry Stay
Right.
Hungry was a big deal for him because he
Mhm.
was with legitimate stars,
Oh yeah.
Jeff Bridges, Sally Field,
Yeah.
and then he was in the Villain, that cowboy movie. I did see that's not my favorite. His earlier, really super early works aren't my favorite because
Right.
he really hadn't fully come into his
His
own
own.
presence as an
Yes.
actor, but Conan really thrust. That's not even a it thrust him
Yeah.
onto the international stage because of Conan,
Mhm.
just like the character of Conan, and he was such a perfect casting, and so then after that, Terminator made him even bigger,
Right.
and, those 2 films were very pivotal in his journey to superstardom.
Yes.
So, okay, well, I'll go ahead and press end recording. This was great. Thank you, Dee, for joining me for this, and that's all I have to say for now. Adios.